Good evening, welcome, or good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. I'm Dean Seddon. I am founder of Maverrik, and I'd love to know where you're joining from. Where in the US are you joining from? Are you joining from overseas? Drop it in the chat and let us know where you're coming on to today, so we can kickstart this session about presenting your webinar like a pro. Now, we're not saying, we're not going to go, oh, present it like a pro. Don't worry, sound team. Don't worry, sound team. I'm not tinkering with my microphone. Well, I'm a little bit. We're not talking about being all stiff and rigid. We're talking about how do you make your presentation feel natural, feel relaxed, and your audience warms to you. That's what we're going to talk about and give you some tips to help you present well in webinars. And maybe you don't have this setup, but maybe you're doing it at your laptop, or maybe you're doing it in another location. But I want to give you some tips that will help you with your presentation skills. Hi, Jeff from Minneapolis. Great to have you. I can see some people are joining on Facebook and on YouTube and LinkedIn, which is awesome. And we're going to kickstart in a second, and we're going to talk about all of the stuff that you need to think about to Detroit. Lawson, I'm based in Plymouth, UK, and I had a trip to Detroit for a meeting, a 2.5 hour meeting. I flew from London Heathrow, landed in Detroit. I then actually got, I think I got a cab, or did I hire a car, drove into Flint, did a 2.5 hour meeting, came back and flew back. And I did the US trip, a round trip, and it was just over 72 hours. I did the whole thing. So great to have you. Hi, Peggy from San Francisco. Brilliant to have you. So we're going to talk about presentation skills in a live environment. This is totally live. So it is currently Tuesday, the 17th of May. And depending on where you're watching, it is right now 3:32 on the East Coast, and Diane from Minneapolis, and I'm sure Graham, our President of the United States, as I call him, Graham is here too. Graham's going to be doing some webinars in a few weeks as well. He's just had hopefully I'm not saying anything out of turn, Graham, but Graham's just had an op, so he's taking it easy, but he's ready to hit the road on the webinars. So Graham's going to be joining. He's going to be talking about personal branding. He's going to be talking about introduction to social selling. So all of that fun stuff's coming up. So keep an eye on the company page here or wherever you're watching for when those free training comes up. So whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, I think that's it. Welcome. What we're going to look at is, the rise of, I can't say the P word, that thing that's happened for 2 years. Because social media doesn't like us talking about it. Yeah, there he is. There's Graham. So Graham's going to be here in a couple of weeks. So Graham's in the chat. If you've got any questions, do ask them, and Graham will be happy to help with the questions as well. So since the P word for 2 years ago, for the last 2 years, obviously a lot of our world has translated online. And more we're presenting and using video in this scenario on social media, on pitches, on presentations to actually get across our message. And one of the biggest challenges people have, how do I come across in a really natural way that flows and I feel comfortable in my own skin? Now, believe it or not, I'm actually an introvert. Yeah, I don't like mixing with people. If you met me in a social context, you'd probably go, is that the same Dean? But what I've learned is how to be myself while staring down the barrel of a camera. And I've met some very slick in-person people who are absolutely amazing at presenting on stages, but when they look down the barrel of that camera, it all comes apart. And they feel awkward, they feel self-conscious, they get hooked on looking at the screen like this, and they talk to people like this. There's a whole host of things that go wrong. But what I want to talk primarily about tonight is how do you make an audience warm to you and you grow to feel comfortable in your own skin presenting in this way. You know, if you do a presentation, if you do a webinar where you're just on the slides, you know, there's the saying of death by PowerPoint. Yeah, you bore people to death because they focus on the slides instead of focusing on you. So what we're going to look at, and I'm just seeing there's a very active chat group, which is brilliant going on. What we're going to focus on is how do you present in a way where it feels like we're just talking to each other. That's what we're going to do. And I'm going to talk to you about that. How do you overcome some of your nerves? How do you get your personality across? And how do you eliminate that awkwardness? Because, you know, I'm just going to play with this, right? There is an awkwardness about doing, you know, the TV people go absolutely nuts, but there is an awkwardness about looking down that. Yeah, there is an awkwardness about doing it. But what you find is the more you do it, the easier it gets. Also, one of the things I found that makes this easier is live. Now, you might think, live, it's terrifying. Why would I want to do live? Let me be honest. I can't go, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, what have I've missed this, I've mocked that. There's no time for it. It's happening. It's real. Now, one of the beauties about social media, and particularly LinkedIn, since they brought their LinkedIn events feature out, is you can gather a crowd pretty quickly of people to come to your event. Each week, Maverrik, since the P word, we've put thousands of people through our events every week. Thousands of people we put through the training. So wherever you're watching now, this is my second training session, live training session this week. I've actually normally do 3, but I've got a week off this week. One off because a member of our team is doing one. But you have the ability with a scenario like this, and literally, I don't know whether we can do this, but I'm going to try and do it. Or I'm going to ask our camera person to do this for me. Can you quickly spin this camera around and show, we're doing this real, right? I want to give you this as a tip so it'll help you. Spin this camera around, and all I want you to do is pan on that camera round so that they see what I'm looking at. But you'll have to switch the screen so that they can see it. So this is what we're going to look at. So you're going to see this in real time. This is not rehearsed. Hi. Yeah. But this setup here it's not the most ideal, but you can see what I'm looking at is I'm looking at that camera and that screen. Now, this setup looks quite cool, but it's a whiteboard. It's a, you can pull it back now and go back to the other slide. It's a screen, it's a camera and a TV. So I have no interaction with you guys, but I'm trying to overcome that technological distance. Now, why would you want to present a webinar in this way? Why would you not do it on Zoom? Well, one of the reasons to do a webinar in this way versus a Zoom one is it often makes a huge difference in the way you are perceived to the outside world. So if you look at this here from this example, it looks like a big room in a big set and all this stuff, but it's relatively simple setup. In fact, Graham is currently getting the same setup in the office in Minneapolis. So we'll have this setup here. We've got this set up in our London office, and we've got this set up in our US office. But presenting live to a camera in this way, live broadcasting, will set you up for other things. It will set you up so that you're comfortable posting video content that feels more natural on social media. The more I present to a camera like this, the more natural you become. You can get terrible nerves. I can remember one of our team doing a webinar like this setup, and they were literally shaking as they were doing it. You could see their hands trembling. But the reality is, no amount of practice will make this first encounter with a camera like this any easier. It deludes you to think it does. It gives you a little bit of self-assurance, but actually all of that fades away when it's you and the camera, because it is me and the camera. I'm looking down the camera talking to you, but it is me and the camera in an empty room. And so I've got no vibes, no feedback. And one of the dangers of doing this in this way is your head goes into overdrive thinking about, what are people thinking about me? Should I have wore this shirt? Should I have done this or that or the other? And your head goes into absolute overdrive about stuff. But the key to being successful and engaging with an audience and feeling like it's, natural, is you forget everything else and you're just talking to one person. So whenever you're presenting, if you want to warm to people, if you want to engage people, you have to kind of literally forget you're talking to a camera and just talk to a person. So I'm just talking to you. It's just you and me in this session tonight. So if there's one person at the other end, it's you. If there's 1,000 people at the other end, it's 1,000 people. So let's look at how we present the webinar like a pro. The idea you want to have, the people want to come away from the session, you want them to come away not going, that was really interesting information. That's a good point. But you want them to come away going, that was I enjoyed that. Yeah. And a lot of the enjoyment comes out of how it's presented, not what is presented, but how. So you have a responsibility, and I have a responsibility to literally change things and keep you interested. And if I fail in that, I failed. So I want to give you some tips that will help you keep people interested. So first one, do not use PowerPoint as your safety blanket. PowerPoint should not distract people from the presenter. Often when we see a webinar, we see a lot of slides with a lot of information. If you're doing that, you are doing yourself a disservice. You should be communicating the information, and the slides should be a cue or a singular or simple focal point that reinforces your message. It should not be, hello everybody, welcome to Present Your Webinar Like a Pro live, and here's our logos. That's not a presentation. That's you as a narrator. You are narrating a PowerPoint. A bit mobile tonight. That's you narrating a presentation. Presenting is when you lead with the information, and this is just pretty information that supports your point. That's all it is. So you need to take a kind of shift your mind about what the PowerPoint is there to do. If I'm telling you, okay, the market's grown by 54%, yeah, in the last 12 months, we're seeing these trends emerge. All that should be here on the PowerPoint is images, graphs that, oh yeah, I can see it. You're absolutely right. You're providing the information, they're the pretty pictures or the one-line sentences and statements that just back it up. Otherwise, you're narrating the slides, in which case people, instead of people focusing on you as the presenter, they lock onto the slides. And so your slide could sit there for 2 or 3 minutes and they're bored because they've seen the same slide when actually the focus should be on you. What happens is often our slides become our comfort blanket. They make us feel more comfortable that we know what we've got to say. And so we follow the slides, which is exactly what we're doing. Narrating. The slides should be following us. The slides should be supporting us. It shouldn't be us supporting the slides. That's death by PowerPoint. Pretty much, death by PowerPoint. So, number one, do not be led by the slides. The slides support you, but you are not following the slides. If you do that, you will bore people. you will switch them off. Second thing, tonality. Yeah. Human beings, I'm just the same. If I don't get a bit of a chop and a change every so often, I switch off. So as I'm talking now, I'm moving around, I'm waving my hands in the air, I'm going low, I'm going quiet, I'm giving quiet and spaces, and I'm creating change in the way I'm communicating to keep people interested, to keep people focused and go, oh, what's that? Yeah. So changing your style, your tone, and just chopping it up every so often makes a huge difference to keep people engaged and interested. If you don't do that, you become monotone, you can become very simple, and people get bored. The other thing that we come to in this section as well is we've got don't be led by the slides. We've got the tonality, in other words, changing your tone of voice, getting excited and going loud and then coming quiet and more reflective. These are all ways to just land points and help people stay focused. So when you've got a real good point to make, you come up, and when you really want to kind of just emphasize something, you come down. My voice is a little rough today because this is my 6th hour of presenting today. So it's pretty intense. So sixth hour, and my voice, you can probably hear it. It's a bit gruff. But I'm giving you an example of changes in tone and pace. In other words, I'll race through a few points and then I'll slow down to emphasize a few points. And one of the biggest things people get afraid of when they're presenting is silence. Silence is a very powerful tool in your webinar, in your event, in your presentation. Silence helps people think. So when I'm emphasizing a point, I will emphasize words. Now, you might be looking at this and going, yeah, Dean, but how do you do that on the fly? How do you do that in real time? You have to choose to do it. You have to make a choice to go, I'm going to emphasize this point. I'm going to tell a story here and I'm going to say it in a particular way. This comes with practice, but most people don't take the time to actually do them. The only practice you get is by doing. You only get better at something by doing. And so we come to that third point of silence. Silence is terrifying on a scenario like this. Silence is so uncomfortable. Why? Because as a presenter, yes, Graham, have a wingman. Yeah, Graham said, have a wingman who can engage with you. Silence is terrifying as a presenter because when you stop talking, it feels like an eternity. And sometimes what happens is you have the perfect presentation, you have all your notes in front of you, and because you're afraid of silence, you race through them. And when you race through your presentation, people aren't absorbing it because it's moving so fast. So as you're putting it together, you've got to create the silence. Now, one of the things I was talking about earlier, I don't have this. I have a clock, a tiny clock in that corner where I know that actually by the time I reach 9 p.m. UK, which is 4 p.m. in the US East Coast, I have to have got through half an hour of my presentation. But what can be really helpful is if you've got an iPad, is to put it up behind your camera on silent with a countdown clock. And you put the countdown clock from, say, let's say your webinar presentation is 45 minutes long or 30 minutes long. Have a countdown clock so that it constantly reminds you how much time you've got left. I've met in the number of presentations I've done, I was once on a speaking event. This was an in-person event, and I was the second speaker. And of course, when you're in a live environment and a speaker starts to overrun, there's very little you can do about it. One of the things that a hallmark of a novice speaker is that they can't get their message into the time frame. So pacing and managing the time is one of the biggest challenges. So I was in this event, and the speaker in front of me before I came on, he was supposed to be on for 40 minutes, and at 55 minutes he came off. And I knew the reality is people have come for an event for a particular time, and I'd lose people if I went over that time. So whilst he's presenting, I'm going, I've lost 15 minutes. So what am I going to do to condense this down? I was looking at it going, where do I need to be at the various points of my presentation? So if you have that countdown clock and you have your presentation marked with, okay, at 10 minutes I need to be here, and at 20 minutes I need to be here, and at 30 minutes I need to be here, or the other way around, I'll just do it and show you. Yeah, if I know where I've got to be, 30 minutes I'm here, 20 minutes I'm here, 10 I'm here, and this is in front of me and I've got a clock counting down, I know where I can take more time and when I need to speed up. Very important you know this, because those pieces of silence in your presentation, those bits of silence help people think. They help people ponder what you're doing. So just to recap, yeah, from where we started, don't depend on the PowerPoint. Change the tonality, change the pace, change even your hand movements so that people see something a bit different. You know, you noticed earlier, I spun the camera around, much to the displeasure of our camera guy, and said, spin it round. Why? So that you get a different emphasis. Change the tonality, shake up the visual representation so it looks a bit different to keep people interested. So change within that. Pacing and silence is really important. That bit helps people think. Racing through your presentation as fast as you can. You know, I had some fun with Vasco, who's on our team here. He looks after the European region for Maverrik. And one of his early webinars, Vasco's done loads of speaking gigs, tons of them. But he's done loads of them in person. And early on when we went to live webinars like this, of course, it's a totally different environment. If you're used to talking to a crowd of people, you've got human feedback. You don't have any of that. You're talking to an empty space. So one of the early times, Vasco was doing a webinar, and the presentation would normally take about 40 minutes. And because there was none of that feedback, he raced through the presentation and did it in about 20 minutes. He doesn't do that now. He got over that kind of whole camera piece, and he's brilliant. But that pacing becomes very important because the silence helps people think. So plan on a countdown so that it gives you the space to create the silence. Now, next piece. Ready? I hope you're taking notes, by the way. Next piece. Yeah. And this is one of the most important things about any presentation, any type of communication, is the stories. People understand and absorb information if you can relate it into an example or a story. So I can remember, and I'll give you an example of this. I can remember when we first got into helping people with video, we did a video series, what we call Talking Heads, where you've got somebody sat on a chair talking to somebody over there answering questions, and then they cut it into a corporate video. We did some of those a few years ago, 5 years ago now, something like that. And the person came and they absolutely fell apart in the filming because they were just uncomfortable in front of a camera. that lens can be terrifying for some people. And when we did this, one of the things we ended up doing is literally going question by question by question by question, so that they felt comfortable on camera. And actually they came to a point where they were more embarrassed about how difficult it was than actually being on camera. So why am I telling you this story? Stories help people relate to other people. Stories help you understand the points you're making. So using stories to expand the point, explain the point, give people examples so that they can understand it just better are really important. So let's say you've got a few points to make in your presentation. Try and create a little story for each one so people can understand what that concept, what that information means in reality. So let's say we're talking about inflation. Everybody's experiencing the inflation, gas prices, food prices, everything's going up at the moment, right? So if I was doing a presentation to talk about inflation and where it might be and say, well, okay, if inflation reaches 10%, that's going to have deep economic shocks to people's household budgets. Some people are, oh yeah, deep economic shocks, but actually 10% doesn't sound like a lot. So to land that, you would say, well, what that means is somebody's going to pay in December or October, and I'm not forecasting this, right? Somebody's going to pay in September, or October, $1.50 more per gallon for gas. And people, oh, that's a lot. Or their electricity bill is going to go up by $20 a month or $50 a month. What you're doing is giving people an example. So you could say, well, a family of four will see their food bill, their food grocery costs go up by $40 a month. They'll see their energy bills go up by, and you're explaining so people understand. That's not a prediction, and I hope I'm drastically wrong with that. But what I'm trying to do is land your point with an example. Now, if you're looking to sell through a webinar or promote your service through a webinar, those stories can be useful, because instead of doing a, hey, buy my stuff, look how cool our stuff is, what you can say is make a point about a particular issue and then use a story to explain how you helped a client overcome that issue. The story is valuable in explaining your point, but also communicating your value. So every point you want to make, think of, I need a practical application or a story to help people understand it and absorb it better. Good? Don't rely on PowerPoint. Lead, PowerPoint follows. Tonality, change it, keep it different, keep it moving. Pacing and silence, very, very important. Plan your times on a countdown and keep your countdown so you don't race ahead and finish early. So it gives you time to expand on your points. Stories help land your points. And the main one I want to kind of bring to you tonight is have very clear points you want to make. Very clear points. So as you've seen, as I've gone, I've emphasized the key points I want to make. And I've got one more point after this one to make. So have clear points. So point number one, yeah, make sure you know what you're saying. Make sure you know the story you're going to apply. Use the tonality. Don't follow the slides. Point number one. Point number two, change the tonality to keep people interested. Point number three, spacing and pacing. Point number four, stories to make sure your message lands. Point number five, clear points. Yeah, point number five is points. Write them down. Tell you this, you can plan a webinar by just having a structure with key points, because most of your sections of your webinar, you won't remember when it gets to a live time anyway. You won't remember half the things you're supposed to say. So the key thing for you is have your key points that you have to make written down on a script. When I was running, I was running, that's the wrong word, but when I was involved in TV, you wouldn't have a script. For live television, you wouldn't have a script. You would have key points that have to happen and actions that have to happen. It would be more of a running order than a script. A lot of people try and go with scripts and it comes undone. So you have to make some clear points in the webinar, and your notes should be the clear points you have to make in the webinar. So if I've got to emphasize tonality, yeah, and this will be really helpful for you. Maybe I'll do it on the board. If I've got point 1, slides, yeah, so I've got to say, don't be led by the slides. I can have 3 sub-points under don't be led by the slides, yeah? In other words, present, don't narrate. Yeah? Point number 1, under slides. Present, don't narrate. Focus on you, not slides. Slides support the speaker. So you could do this as cue cards or just have a running order, and you have it in front of you there, and you see point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and you might have little sub points that help you get to your points, help you get it. The beauty of that is if you lose your slides, they get stuck, they don't work as planned, you lose where you are in the presentation, you've got an anchor point to come back to every single time. So you have clear points to make, and those clear points are in a nice little running order for you. That's all you do. The running order and the times count down will help you focus much better, rather than having, and think about it, if your focus is the slides and something goes wrong here, you toast, you're absolute toast. But when you've got a running order, even if the slides fall apart, you lose your place, you lose your train of thought, you go, where was I last? And your points are right in front of you. And you remember which points you've got to make. So having clear points on your running order, but having clear points to make for the audience become important. And those stories help reinforce it and make sure it lands. So the final point I want to make in this session, and hopefully this has been useful for you, is you've got to be yourself. You've got to relax and be yourself. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be prepared to look a little foolish. Sometimes stuff goes wrong. Sometimes stuff doesn't work. Sometimes you say things that you maybe go, well, do you know what? I'm going to come around here for a minute. Sometimes the camera people absolutely hate it when I do this, because it really upsets them because they set everything up in position. But sometimes you just have to be yourself. I say some stuff sometimes, I think, oh, what have I said? Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way you had planned. So sometimes what you have to do is you just have to accept, I'm going to do this in my way, and my faults, my failings will help me, because people will warm to me because I'm me. A flawless presentation isn't very interesting unless you've got amazing information to share, world-changing information to share. So you have to be yourself. Your personality has to come through. You're not anybody else. You're not a copy of anybody else. You are you. The great thing about, if you look at social media, a lot of people are trying to be somebody else. They're trying to be somebody who's putting themselves out there in their way, in their style, and they go, I like that, so I want to be like that. Copies don't work. You've got to be comfortable, be prepared to make your own mistakes, and just, people will warm to you or they won't. People will warm to you or they won't. Not everybody is going to like your presentation. Not everybody's going to like your style. Not everybody's going to agree with what you say in your presentation. To get elected to high office, in any country, in any office, you get elected with a minority of the population. So even if, the highest office in the land, President of the United States, you don't get the majority of the population, you get a majority of the people who decided to vote. So even if you get to the highest office in the land, you end up in a situation where the minority of the people voted for you and the majority didn't. But that's the nature of the beast. Whatever you do, you get a new job, you go for a new career. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to, but it's better to be yourself, relax in it and go, this'll be what it'll be. Tonight's session will be what it'll be. I'm going to throw my all at it. I'm going to do my best, but it's going to be me doing it. It's going to be done my way and the way I feel comfortable doing it, and people will warm to me or they won't. We put ourselves under so much pressure to do things in a particular way. And the reality is, it's really fascinating. When we see somebody else do a presentation, we go, oh, that was really good. It was flawless. I didn't spot any mistakes. It was interesting. It was engaging. It was a really good presentation. The person who did it went, oh, I missed this. I missed that. I didn't do this. I shouldn't have said that. I wanted to say more about that and I missed it. We will always critique and we will always be our worst critics. It's not about the critics out there. Actually, most people, they are the worst critics. I know I am. I go off and go, oh, what did I do there? What did I say there? But that's the nature of the beast. That's the way this thing works. When you get in front of a camera, you either be yourself and people love it or hate it, or you try to be somebody else and you will look awkward and shifty and uncomfortable. And even in the first times that you do a presentation like this, you will be awkward and uncomfortable because it's a new environment, it's a foreign environment. Even if you've gone from a laptop, presenting on a laptop, to presenting in a camera like this, it will feel awkward and uncomfortable. I bet I've done live presentations in this format. I've probably done now maybe 200 to 300 of these. But the first time I did one of these, it wasn't the same setup. It was a cheapo tripod from Amazon with a webcam stuck on top with my laptop plugged in through a USB, and the laptop was there, and I had a second screen jacked up on some books there so I could see the chat. That's how I did the first webinar, because it was we went into lockdown and the event, physical in-person event, was the next day. So we said to everybody we're going to do it online. So literally my first live event that was kind of sort of like this was like done with sticking plasters, and it was rough and it was difficult. It was uncomfortable, and I kept going like this and looking over there, and all of that stuff happened. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you become, to the point right now, I actually feel more uncomfortable doing this to my phone than I do doing this like this. I think it's actually harder to do it to your phone than it is to do it like this. Because when you do it on your phone, you have to look at yourself, and actually looking at yourself is one of the biggest distractions you can do when you're watching, when you're producing or presenting. So being yourself, getting comfortable in your own skin, that camera in front of you will always amplify your own insecurities. Whatever you're insecure about as a person, that camera will amplify. It's like a mirror. And, for you to be comfortable and for you to be warm and engaging, you have to get over the fact that the mirror is presenting bits of you, maybe distorted, maybe amplified, bits that you're uncomfortable about, yourself, your appearance, your nerves, all of that stuff will come out. And that doesn't matter whether you're male or female, that will come out through the lens of the camera. You'll see it, you'll feel uncomfortable with it. A lot of famous actors and actresses, they don't like to watch their own films because they feel uncomfortable watching themselves. You look at some of these famous actors and they're incredible in the films, but some of them just won't watch themselves because they think, I can't do it. So being yourself actually is the most liberating thing you can do on the webinar. It's the most engaging and warming thing you can do. So summary of points. Yeah? Don't be led by the slides. Change your tonality. Pacing and silence. Really important. Stories, points. Be yourself. Now, I'd love to tell you that there was some other secret hacks. I'm going to give you some of my tips. If there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I would encourage you, if you're running a business, leading a business, in a senior leadership position in a business, doing some of these presentations in this way, presenting, it's like a mini TV studio, even if you're just stood up in front of a camera. It's a brilliant way, really good way to build up your resilience, build up your inner confidence, really find out who you are as well, because when you do this stuff, you start to realize these are my insecurities and these are the things I'm good at. And actually, it's very good from a personal development point of view to help you overcome some of the kind of hang-ups you have in life, because that camera can be brutal in terms of the way it makes you can feel. You can feel so uncomfortable and all your insecurities pop out. So I would encourage you, if you were going to do some presentations or some webinars, it may seem like a little bit of extra tech and scariness, but actually going into this kind of format can be really good for you. It can be really powerful and an enabler for you to do more things. I don't think, I've been on TV, news channels and stuff like that, and I look back at some of the things I did in the early 2010s and 2012s, and it was like, oh my, I've seen some. In fact, some of the people at Maverrik, every so often, dig out the footage of me on BBC and Sky News and stuff like that from 10 years ago, and they bring them out just to show new members of staff, just so that they realise this is what this guy was like 10 years ago. And I look at them and go, oh, shocking. But it can actually be good for you, because it will help prepare you if you wanted to start to build like a business commentary where you appeared on, local TV or anything like that as a commenting, which is great for PR, by the way, to get that presence on commenting on news stories and what have you. You need to be as comfortable as you can be in front of a camera glaring at you in the way it does. So if you're trying to build your personal brand, I know Graham's going to be covering that, but if you're trying to do it through media coverage and press and PR like that, getting comfortable with a camera in this way is really useful. It's also really useful to do this more because you start to learn how to operate despite distraction. So when you're doing a presentation like this, it's really easy for something to happen over here and it to knock your train of thought, or something to happen over here and it wobbles you. So the more you do this, the better you are at focusing, even when there's a whole host of craziness going on. And one of the presentations I did like this, which was really strange actually, one of the presentations I did, it was this kind of setup, but actually I was doing it in a live office with people walking around working whilst I'm stood in a room, I think there was a glass wall, and I'm doing this presentation live, and there's people walking past making a cup of coffee, and people doing this and doing that. So this kind of setup is really helpful for you, albeit it's probably the scariest setup you'll ever do. But once you've done it, doing YouTube videos, podcasts, video podcasts, you become so much more comfortable, so much more relaxed. You stop looking in the wrong places and start looking, when you're looking at yourself instead of looking at the camera, which we're all terribly bad at doing. We actually start to do it well. So you've got to be yourself. You've got to conquer this fear. And the only way to conquer the fear is have that structure in front of you. Don't be reliant on the slides behind you. They should be supporting you. This document with your key points and your countdown timings should be driving the way you run the webinar, the way you push the webinar and the event forward. So if we've got any questions, please put them in the chat wherever you're watching, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Drop the questions in the chat. They come into one central inbox. I can answer your questions. If you want to know how we did the tech setup, we can answer some of those questions. If you want, and I'm sure Graham, I'm going to surprise Graham now. If anybody wants some support in their presentation skills, we're more than happy to offer a complimentary 15-minute call where we can help you unpack some of this for your own webinars, for your own presentations you want to do. Even dig into some of the PowerPoint techniques that you can do to help you avoid turning into death by PowerPoint. As you'll see, by the way, I've done this whole thing off one page of notes. I've not needed a PowerPoint. I've stayed on topic. I've been able to remember my points. I've not got distracted. Why? Because I have the process in front of me. I've got my countdown. I know in 15 minutes time, if there's no questions, if there's questions, we'll be signing off. If nobody asks any questions, we'll sign off earlier. Structure is very important. It gives you a reassurance and a confidence of these are the points I'm going to make and this is the timings. So I know what I've got to deliver, the results I want to deliver. I know the timings, and if I'm running over, I know I have to pick up pace, and if I'm running under, it gives me time to tell some stories. It gives me time to expand my points a little bit more, give a summary. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions at all? I'm just seeing if there's any. No? Oh, you're all quiet tonight. Very, very quiet, folk. Well, if there's no questions, we'll sign off early. But one of the things I want to say is I'd really encourage you to sign up for the personal brand workshop Graham's going to do. The date and all the event details will be appearing on our company page. But also if you're on our email list, we'll be inviting you to that too. Personal brand is everything these days, and some of the stuff we've touched on today, really sign up for Graham. Graham's going to give you a walkthrough of it, and I know after he's up, he's raring to go to get onto that webinar and give you as much value as he can. So thank you for joining us today. Hopefully I've not given you death by PowerPoint. There was no PowerPoint in sight, but do check out the upcoming workshop, especially Graham's personal branding workshop, all free to help you grow your business and build out your profile so that people want to work with you and you are the go-to expert in your field. So thanks for joining us.
Last year, Maverrik has helped generate more than 15 million in new business. The biggest reason for this is our 90-day training and implementation platform we call the Accelerator program, where we teach your team to sell on social media with an implement-as-you-go strategy. It's not a pre-recorded course, it's hands-on sales training that develops and grows with you, with 90 days of real action that generates business and long-term revenue. So who is it for? This program is for entrepreneurs, marketing and sales professionals who want to sell without ads, cold calling, or pushy tactics. A better way of selling with real steps to take, which speeds up your sales process without burning any bridges. These are just a few examples of results our members have achieved using the Accelerator. As you can see, the Accelerator isn't about quick wins, it's about building a better sales process. If you'd like to learn more, just book a call with the Maverrik team and we'll show you how the Accelerator program can win you new business.